exciting. Super glad to see everybody here. And thanks for spending New Year's Eve with us. So New Year's Eve is kind of a special holiday for me. Normally, it's kind of generally thought of as a party, kind of go out on the town holiday. But for me, for the bulk of my adult life, I was not able to spend New Year's Eve with my family. I worked as a police officer, so I was either working work or a club job for pretty much all of my adult life. And so my New Year's Eve, I got to ring in with a couple of coworkers and a bunch of strangers. So through that, it really kind of highlighted for me the importance of spending that time intentionally with your family and your close friends, and really making it an opportunity to think back on the things that happened over the year, the good things, the bad things, and kind of, live through those again, kind of close the door on the past year, and then an opportunity to, at the same time, projecting forward, kind of cast vision and hope and dream about what is to come in the next year. And so it's a really cool opportunity to really experience that with your family and close friends, and I hope that all of you take a piece of that into this and don't just think about it as like a college kids party holiday, because it can really be so much more than that. And so in that vein, I wanted to talk today about resolutions. They're such a big part of New Year's Eve and coming into the new year and this new year, new you kind of thing that's going around. And so I started off with just a simple definition of what a resolution is. And one, it's a firm decision to do or not do something. And two, the quality of being determined or resolute. And that sounds a little bit like defining the word with the word. So I looked up resolute, and it's got a better definition. I like it. That date up there is actually, that's the first date. That's the year that the word was first used, which I thought was interesting. It's kind of an old word, but not really. But I love this definition of resolute. Admirably purposeful, determined, and unwavering. That really has some gravity to it and is kind of convicting with how we approach our New Year's resolutions. And so both of these words come from a Latin root word that I didn't put up on the screen. I'm just going to read through it. It's resolutus, and it means to loosen, release, or pay. And really that sounds like it doesn't connect at all, but really it carries this idea of completion with it, of finalizing something and moving forward from it. And so this word resolute, resolve and relute and resolution all come from this same Latin root word. And so how they make that jump is essentially when you resolve a question or a problem, you come to a conclusion, and then once you've reached that conclusion, you can proceed to act. So what we see with our New Year's resolutions is that you resolve or you make up your mind to do some action or something, and then you move forward from it. And unfortunately, most of our New Year's resolutions are probably not a good illustration of our resolute definition here, because I think statistically they say only about 10% of them succeed, which is it's not great. But as Jace read for us earlier, the psalmist gives us this really beautiful example of what a resolution is. And who knows, maybe he wrote it for the new year. But Psalm 119, verses 111 and 112, your laws are, I think Jace read from the ESV. I don't know where he ran off to. Was it the ESV? Yeah. And so what I've got on the screen for you is going to be from the NLT. So it reads a little different, but it's nice to be exposed to multiple translations. Verse 111, your laws are my treasure, my heart's delight. I am determined to keep your decrees to the very end. And this word laws here in verse 111 in the original Hebrew, it kind of, the word really kind of translates as testimony or witness. And so what the psalmist is saying is that because everything that God says, does, and stands for is the psalmist's personal treasure and heart's delight, he resolves to keep God's decrees and laws to the very end, to keep God's standards and expectations to the end of his life. And that's so simple and beautiful, and it really captures the heart of what a resolution should be. It's this kind of firm commitment to an action that's fueled by this deep connection to something worthy and consistent that drives us forward in that commitment to the action. And I loved it so much, in fact, that I wanted to give y'all something that would be more tangible for y'all. And so I jumped online and I found some contemporary examples of resolutions and the spirit of the New Year's resolution in meme form. May all your troubles last as long as your New Year's resolutions. Well, if you're good at your resolutions, that's not great. With our 10% goal, though, that works out pretty well for us. What's next? Yeah. How I wanted to end the year, how I actually ended the year. That hurts. That hits a little close to home. This New Year's Eve at around 11:55, order a pizza for delivery, and when it arrives, tell the driver, I ordered this a year ago. That guy's crazy. What's your New Year's resolution? I mean, I'm already pretty cool, but I want to get cooler. I put this one in here just for Rob. I don't know where he's at. But to those I offended in 2023, try to improve so I don't have to do it again in 24. I know, right? I wish some people's New Year's resolution was to start thinking twice before they open their mouths. We get a double dose of Leo here. To everyone who still goes to the gym after January. My New Year's resolution is to stop procrastinating, but I'm not starting till next week, though. That one also hits a little close to home. New Year's resolution. I resolve to cancel the gym membership that I got last January. That one might have been my favorite one. I got a good laugh out of it when I first came across it, and I was like, this is perfect. And then I kind of got to thinking about it, and it kind of hit me as the most real one of the bunch, kind of the heaviest, most reality-dipped meme of them all. What's y'all's success rate with your New Year's resolutions? Yeah. So you're not knocking it out of the park every year? Yeah. I personally, I probably fall closer to Mr. Potato myself. I'd say that I probably fulfill about 20% of my New Year's resolutions. And that's not to say that I'm out there just like King Konging them every year, right? I did just enough to say that I did it and kind of check the box. So 1 in 5 of my New Year's resolutions year to year, I complete. By the statistics, I'm killing it, right? That's double the national average. The smart people say only 1 in 10 get completed, which is not great. But even with me doing double the national average, still more often than not, I end up right here next to Mr. Potato, using this year's resolution to try to fix or rectify or make up for last year's failed resolution, right? But why is that? Why do we struggle with completing and maintaining our resolutions? Do we aim too high? Do we expect too much of ourselves? Do we underestimate life and everything that it's got for us in the coming year? Are we too busy? Maybe just too lazy? I watched a clip on YouTube the other day of a Stephen Furtick sermon, and he was talking about this idea of escape and how at the root of every New Year's resolution, there's a seed of escape, this kind of desire to get out of whatever situation we're in and get into something different, to get into a new situation. And whether it's financially, physically, relationally, spiritually, emotionally, whatever it is, the core motivation is to escape from where we are and get into something new. And it kind of fits with this grass is greener philosophy that a lot of people have. Where I'm at is not great, and so somewhere else has to be better. Now, this idea of escape does not at all jive with how our psalmist views resolutions, but does it fit with our contemporary example? Yeah, right? Like, I'm trying to get away from this and get those six-pack abs, right? Now, the clip moved on, Furtick went off in a different direction, but the idea really grabbed a hold of me. So I kind of sat down with it, and I rolled it around, and I stewed on it. And it really got me thinking about math. And as I'm sure happens to all of you when you think deeply about math, is you come up with an equation. Like that. Memory over standard equals action. So the idea here, the premise, if you will, is that if you want to change something in your life, if you want to resolve to make something different in your life, some sort of action needs to happen. Now, the action isn't the resolution. The action is what we want from the resolution. It's the result we want to happen. So really, the whole equation is kind of the resolution, and the action is the result. It's what we want to get out of it. So we put action over on that right side of the equation because it's the output we want. Now we get to work backwards, and if we know the result we want, then we've just got to figure out what inputs we need to put into the equation to get that result. So let's start with the standard. Our expectation of what could or should be is our standards. And like the psalmist talked about in verse 112, I am determined to keep your decrees to the very end. Our standard is the plumb line. It's the hope, the view, the expectation of what could or should be. In the psalmist's case, God's rules, God's standards were his standard. He was trying to line himself up and mirror God's standards for himself. But I know that for myself at least, my standard tends to stretch out and incorporate a lot of things of the world and culture and society, and all of those things kind of get amalgamated into our standards, sometimes unintentionally even. And so what we really see is that our standard is kind of the accumulation of all of our external inputs, the good and the bad, everything we're taking in, everything we're perceiving. It's how we see things represented, how we perceive things should be. It's kind of a similar idea to our worldview, except that where our worldview is a representation of how we believe things are, our standard is how we believe things ought to be, how we believe things should be. So, for example, say you go down the street, you go to that Honda dealership, and you spend several hours shopping, talking to the salesman, you find just the right car, pick out all the options, it's there on the lot, you talk to the finance manager, you talk to the sales manager, you tell them you don't want that protective clear coat, sign on the dotted line, and you're walking out to the car to take your new baby home, and boy, is she pretty. Comes with a skyline in the background, it's amazing. And you go, and as you're walking up to the car and you're about to open the door and you get in, you have expectations about this car. Like, it should turn on when you push the button. The doors should work. The heater should work. The trunk should open. It shouldn't have scratches, right? It shouldn't be broken. And one particular thing that I really like about new cars is they should have a certain kind of smell to them. What smell is that? It's new car smell, right? Such a universal expectation that we've bottled it and we sell it, right? So, say you get in your brand new car, you're ready to drive it off, you close the door, and instead of new car smell, it smells like Chilean sea bass grilled over an open flame with some lemon and rosemary and garlic. And it's a beautiful dish, and it makes us all hungry. But I'm going to get right back out of that car and go talk to that salesman and be like, sir, why does my car smell like fish? So imagine the salesman's like, well, so all the car dealerships and all the car manufacturers, we got together and we decided that we're going to make grilled Chilean sea bass the new car smell. Now, as much as you may enjoy eating grilled Chilean sea bass, I venture you probably don't want your car to smell that way. But why? Why do we not want our car to smell that way? It's not the standard, right? It's not our expectation. We expect our new car to have new car smell, not Chilean sea bass smell. And when our expectations and the reality don't line up, it creates friction, it creates dissonance. And on the mild end, if your car smells like fish, that actually may be more frustrating than a minimal thing. But It just frustration, irritation, right? All the way on to the more extreme end, anxiety and conflict and stress and anger can come from this dissonance that we experience when the reality and our standards aren't matching up. But our standard is a vitally important piece of this equation, and one of the only two pieces that we can manage that will impact the action or the result on the back end, that will generate the change that we desire. And so the reality is that our standards tend to change very slowly. If all of them did get together and they changed the new car smell to fish, we would all be very unhappy. But if they didn't change it back, we would adjust. We'd get used to it, and over a period of time, that would just become the standard. Cars just smell like Chilean sea bass, right? And people would forget that new car smell was even a thing. But it happens slowly, right? And there are things that can cause our standards to shift dramatically, quickly. But generally speaking, it's a slow process where we change our inputs, where we modify what we're receiving and what we're exposing ourselves to. And that starts to shift our expectations and our perception of how things should be. And in the long run, our standards shift along with it. And that becomes a vital piece of our long-term growth and our ability to sustain positive change. Because as our standards shift to accommodate the changes that we make, the standard shift is what makes them a long-term piece of our life. Short changes can change back quickly, but the standard shift is really what bolsters it and makes it a long-term shift over time. But for today, talking about New Year's resolutions, we need something we can change quickly, we can rapidly deploy it, and see some change in action today. Which brings us to our second variable in the equation, memory. And it's not tricky terminology, it's just the collection of our life's experiences as we remember them. All of our events, interactions, people, everything we've done in life, and we keep it in this kind of overly complex filing cabinet that is our brain. And one of my favorite ways to conceptualize memory and how it works in our brain is a warehouse full of filing cabinets. And everything gets stored in there somewhere. The more important something is, the more often we need to recall it, the more detail we need to retain from it, the more emotion attached to it. Closer to the front of the warehouse it's stored, it's clean, it's well lit, very organized, right by the door. You can get to it quick and easy. Your brain's like, oh, got it, right here. The less important, the less frequently you need it, the further back into the warehouse it goes, until you get all the way to the very back of the warehouse. And there's just this big pile of memories, and they just chuck things on there, stuff we don't need to remember. If you ever need to recall something from there, you're like, there was this one time I did this thing. I don't remember. It's there somewhere. And that's the stuff that's in that junk pile, right? And this is definitely an oversimplification of how memory works, and certainly not entirely accurate, but I feel like it paints this very clear, kind of digestible image of kind of the process without getting kind of too deep into the weeds of neuroscience and that gobbledygook. But with that in mind, I have some interesting memory facts for you this morning. One, almost forgetting something makes us more likely to remember it. And so the idea is if we almost forget something and you kind of have to struggle and work and process to recall it, that tells your brain, this is something that's more important, so I'm going to refile it somewhere easier to recall. And so every time you go through that, every iteration of trying to recall it, your brain's like, okay, this is more important. And it will continue to place it in a more rapidly accessible area of the filing system. Learning new things physically changes our brain. So our brain's made up of lots and lots and lots of neurons, and they all interconnect with each other, and our memories are spread across a multitude of these neurons. And so as we learn new things, the neurons form new connections with each other and exchange information. And in brain scans, scientists can see that as people learn, on the scans, they can physically see structural changes in the brain. And so just like in Looney Tunes, as you learn something, your brain literally grows. Not quite that big, but it's literally growing, which is kind of cool. Number 3, our brains have an almost unlimited storage capacity, which is kind of neat. A researcher calculated kind of the I guess, computer equivalent of what our brain storage capacity would be, and it's 2.5 petabytes. I don't know how much you know about bits and bytes, but I didn't know what that was. And so it's 2.5 million gigabytes, which is still kind of an abstract number to wrap our heads around. So that's the equivalent of about 300 years worth of 4K videos. So it's a lot of data that our brain can manage and hold on to, which makes this next statistic kind of bleak. Our current almost unlimited access to knowledge via phones and Google and the internet is impacting how much we actually know. So our brain is super interesting. It's a very high-level processing machine, and it's very efficient, wildly efficient. And so our brain is acute enough to recognize that if I look up something on Google, say the year the word resolute was first used, my brain knows that I can rapidly and easily re-access that information, and so it puts a low priority on putting it in long-term storage. And so they find in research that this is consistent across all information that we're learning on the internet. Your brain recognizes, because of its hyper-efficiency, that it doesn't need to put emphasis on storing as much of that stuff because we can so easily re-access the information. Now, what's really interesting is that researchers believe that that same thing may be happening with our recall of people and places and events because of our access to Instagram and Facebook, where we store all of our human connections and all of our life's events and birthdays and people. Our brain is recognizing that for efficiency's sake, it doesn't necessarily need to prioritize that stuff quite as much because we can rapidly re-access it. Now, I have a personal experience that I think lends to that. And when I was younger, and some of y'all probably have the same experience, you remembered everybody's phone number. If you didn't memorize their phone number, you weren't calling them because the phone book was that thick, right? And just somewhere over the years, I know maybe 4 phone numbers by heart now. Yeah, they're all in our phone, right? And it's not that we forgot the numbers. It's that your brain, for efficiency's sake, like, I don't need to store any of that in an easily recallable place. It throws it all in that junk pile in the back of the warehouse because it's all right there. We can get to it super easy. And that's just like this super practical, very tangible example of this process at work. And really what that tells me is that we must be intentional about our memory. And our psalmist understood this in verse 111. Your laws are my treasure, my heart's delight. And as I mentioned earlier, that word translated as laws here is the Hebrew word eduth, which means testimony or witness. And so what the psalmist is saying here is that who God is, what God has said, and what God has done is his heart's delight. The psalmist's memory of who God is and his memory of what God has done, where he's seen God move in his life, where he's seen God show up, those memories are what he chooses to cherish and hold as his heart's delight. He's choosing to hold on to those memories. He's managing his memory. Now, we don't know for sure who wrote Psalm 119, where our verses come from today, but in all likelihood, it was either David or Daniel. And both of them are men who had some life experiences, some memories that they would probably rather forget. Some memories that have given the opportunity they would like to throw on that junk memory pile in the back of the warehouse rather than relive them. Does anyone here today have memories that they would rather forget? Yeah, I know I do. Yeah, that family member or that friend that passed away too soon, the coworker who wronged you, maybe cost you your job, a traumatic event, a car accident, the missed opportunity, the fall into addiction, the mistake or the slip of character that cost you a friendship or even a marriage. We all have memories that we've got no interest in reliving. So what do? We can't delete them. It's not how it works. And heck, the more we recall them, the more we think about them, the more emotion attached to them, the better we remember them. So what does the psalmist do? He chooses his highlight reel. He chooses to fill his highlight reel with God's goodness and God's movement in his life. You get to edit your own highlight reel. You get to choose what's portrayed and what isn't. Could David have filled his highlight reel with memories of his brothers telling him he wasn't good enough? Of King Saul telling him he was too small to fight a giant? Memories of hiding in swamps and caves and going to sleep hungry, living in fear, on the run? Absolutely, he could have. And everyone would have told him how awful that must have been and felt sorry for him and told him how amazing it was that he made it through that to where he is now. And certainly no one would have faulted him for wearing all of that on his sleeve. But what did David do instead? Instead of memories of doubters in his highlight reel, he had scenes of him rescuing a lamb from a lion, scenes of a faithful God who had been present with him in times of trial and testing. Instead of scenes of fear and hunger and sleeping in cold, damp caves, he had scenes of writing poetry, playing music, singing, and praising a God who had been present and faithful in times of difficulty and want. David chose how he was going to edit his memory highlight reel. Every life event, everything he experienced still happened, still was in his memory, but he chose how he was going to remember it. You are responsible for managing your memory. The elements you choose to remember, and more specifically, how you choose to remember them, you're in control of. Your spouse has said 5,647 nice, encouraging, thoughtful things to you, and yet you remember the two mean things they said. You have friends and family all around you that love you deeply, but you choose to remember the rejection from years ago. You've worked hard, you achieved, you succeeded, but you choose to remember that person who told you you'd never be good enough. You must take control of and manage your memories. You create your highlight reel, good or bad. You do it. If we want our action to change, if we want our results to change, to be different, we have to change the inputs on the front end. Managing our memory is the piece of the equation that we can change right now and see an immediate impact on our action or our results. Paul understood this very well. In chapter 3, verse 13 of Paul's letter to the church in Philippi, it's Philippians 13:3, Paul says, "No, dear brothers and sisters, I have not achieved it," and that he's referencing perfection that he talked about in the previous verse. So he's saying, I have not achieved perfection, but I focus on this one thing, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead. And already, I hear y'all saying it, pump the brakes. You can't forget memories, right? And y'all are right. But the Greek word that we see translated here as forgetting, epilanthemi, that's a fun one to say, speaks to this idea of putting a thing out of your mind or no longer tending to it. So it's not forgetting a memory, it's not removing a memory, it's simply not dwelling on the memory. And so what Paul is saying here is that he has learned to focus, he's learned to be intentional about not dwelling in the past, about not dwelling on past failures, past temptations, past relationships and difficulties. He's learned to manage his memory. He edits his highlight reel to contain the things that point forward, that drive him forward to his goal, to the action or the result that he wants. In verse 14, I press on to reach the end of the race and receive the heavenly prize for which God, through Christ Jesus, is calling us. And so here Paul is telling us his action. He's telling us the result he's aiming for. He wants to get to the end of this race and receive the heavenly prize. And to achieve that, Paul has recognized that he has to change his inputs. He had to start managing his memory. And he recognized that if he didn't manage his memory, if he didn't edit his highlight reel with intention, that it would negatively influence his personal growth, his witness for God, and his ability to do kingdom work. And that's the danger in not managing our memory, is that it directly impacts how we live our lives. It directly impacts the actions and the results that we see in our lives. If you let that one time your supervisor told you that you were lazy and he's not even sure how you got hired here in the first place, play on your highlight reel, and then just when you're at work, you hear all your coworkers complaining about, oh, this place is garbage and the snack machine's always broken and half the toilets don't work. What do you think the result's going to be? Your standard from the environment becomes that it's a garbage job and nothing works. And because of the highlight reel that you're repeating in your head that you're lazy and should never even have been hired in the first place, your memory is that you're lazy and don't deserve the job. And so the action, you'll probably start complaining about the workplace and allowing yourself to be lazy. The input, the memory, and the standard directly impact the action that we see on the backside. Or maybe your boyfriend or girlfriend or spouse broke your trust. Your highlight reel is just replaying the pain and the hurt over and over. You hear all the statistics about marriage and divorce rates. The news, the internet, the media, they're all full of stories of scandals and liars and cheats. So your standard becomes that committed relationships rarely work out and people just plain can't be trusted. How will that impact your relationships going forward? You're likely to be closed off, slow to give trust. You'll be actively looking for negative things in relationships, tallying up every misstep that they make and letting that drive your decisions and your actions going forward. So let's take that last example and math it and see what we come up with. So if the action on the results side that we want is to have a healthy and committed relationship, for the standard, let's probably start with surrounding ourselves with people that are in healthy and committed relationships, right? And I know that's a slow process, like I said, but taking the time to do it pays dividends on the back end, because not only are those people setting an example for the thing that you're aiming for, but they're going to support and reinforce the memory shifts that you're going to be working on through the process. Instead of the pain and the hurt and the highlight reel, maybe we edit in memories of people who supported us through hard times, the people who have your trust and you theirs. Memories of times God was present and active in your trust. When you stop looking for flaws in people and start looking for the good, you're going to find it. But that's really hard to do if your highlight reel's just constantly looping memories of people being terrible to you. If you shift that edit in your memory reel, your highlight reel's constantly playing memories of times people were good, times people had your trust, and it was validated, times God was active in your trust. That's what's going to be coming out on the back end. So as we wind down here, I've got a little exercise for everyone to do. So at all of your seats, there should be a blank note card. There should be some pins in the seat backs in front of you, or if you're in the front row, the seat back behind you. Got a monkey arm, that thing. All right, everyone ready? All right. So up at the top on one side, I want you to write our equation. Memory over standard equals action. Write it big, write it small, doesn't matter. So now, below that, you're going to write the action that you want. Something you want to start, something you want to stop, something you want to change. Could be relational, financial, physical. Maybe it's to cut sodas out. Maybe it's to start budgeting monthly. Maybe it's to change the way you speak to your wife or your husband or your boyfriend or your children. Whatever it is, just put it down there. Doesn't have to be something big, it can be small. Give us a little bit of time.
Father, closest friend, most beautiful, most beautiful.
Okay. So now flip the card over. And on the back, we're going to put our standard and our memory. But before you write, I want you to think about, with the action you have on the front, what your current standard and memory are. What are the current way that you view the action? What are the memories you have associated with it? What is the expectation you have tied to it? And how is that influencing that action right now? I want you to think about that. And then what I want you to write down is the changed standard or memory, or both. What is the thing that you're going to shift in your memory or your standard to start to work towards achieving the action that you have on the other side of that card? And again, it doesn't have to be a big thing. Start small. Just a small shift to your standard to start that movement of change. One small change, one small edit you can make to your highlight reel right now that will have an influence on that action that you desire, that result that you're looking for. I'll give you some time to work through that. Don't rush it. Take your time with it. I've got nowhere to be. Give it another few seconds here. So many people go their entire lives just letting their highlight reel play. Whatever pops into it, whatever your brain decides you need to be focusing on. That's why we feel so good in good times and bad times. The brain's like, oh, he's stewing on this. Let's give him more of that. Oh, he's stewing on this. Let's give him more of that. If we're not intentional about how we edit our highlight reel, it's going to be more of the same. The same that you've been going through year after year. The same failed resolution. The same failed relationships. Right now is your opportunity to start managing your memory, to be intentional with your highlight reel, to set yourself up to begin to experience and live out the transformed life that God has planned for each of us over this coming year. God, I lift up everyone in here to you today, Lord, their dreams, their hopes, their aspirations for the coming year. I pray that as they move into this new season, as they approach all of these expectations they have for what is to come, that you would help them to highlight the moments from the past that will drive them forward in those things, God. That you will help them to select and be intentional about editing in those memories where you were present and active, where people were present and active as representatives and images of you, God. Help us to incorporate all of those things into our highlight reel as we move forward, God. I pray a blessing over everyone here today. I pray you'd be with them as we transition into the new year. Be with them tonight as they travel around to celebrations, that they'd be safe on the road. Lord, and I ask that you would just give every single one of us an opportunity to talk to somebody about you, to be that representative to someone else for you, and that you would equip us through engaging us in transformation of our standards, through engaging us in transformations of how we manage our memory, to be ready and prepared when that moment comes, God. All of these things we ask in your name. Amen. Thank you so much, guys. Have a happy and blessed new year, and we'll see you back here next week.